hopefully. Thanks, Michelle. Okay, I think. I've never had to share a screen from a Canvas, so bear with me for a second. All righty, so can you see it's an agenda? Is that visible? I got the right thing? Okay, perfect. All right, so kind of going over what I just said, the agenda. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to go through this presentation really quickly, then we'll hear from Joel. Actually, that's flipped, and then we'll hear from Andres and Dr. Reed, as well as Michelle Leet, who's going to go over some information about our upcoming branch elections. And then we'll hear from Paul Berry, who is a representative from the governor's Hispanic Advisory Council. And then our meeting will be concluded. But throughout this, we're going to try and keep this not only informative, but try and get some questions from you all here today to try and keep it as interactive as possible and fun to be a part of. So as you know, here in Virginia, we have an election every year. And this year we're going to be electing our members of the U.S. House of Representatives. There's some local offices that are going through having elections as well, such as, the city of Fairfax has some elections as well. But the topic and the focus of tonight's conversation is how important it is for us to make sure that we participate in this democratic process. Our vote, our voice is very important. And when we vote, there are a lot of things that our vote does for us. It can help us create change in the way that it works best for the community in which we live, along with our visions and goals. It's our constitutional right, as well as it is what protects our, make sure that those that we have in office are there to represent everyone and understand and is willing to come out and speak to one, they're approachable, and two, that they work for us as a community and as well as an individual. And so that's why it's incredibly important for us to make sure that we participate in the process. So this year, the election is going to be on Tuesday, November 8th. Polls are going to be open from 6 to 7. Now, remember, if you get online at 7 p.m. On election day, they have to allow you to vote. So please, please, please make sure that you go out and you vote. So what is it that we're going to be voting on? First of all, there's a special election before I go into the general election. If you live in House District 35, Delegate Mark Keene was your delegate, even during he has resigned. He accepted a position with the Biden administration, and so they're going to be holding a special election primary. The Democratic primary is October 8th, and then it's going for the general election on January 10th, which is one day before our General Assembly session begins. So I will, once I'm done with this presentation, I will put links in the chat for you to be able to find out whether or not you are in this district and how to get some more information about that. But also on the ballot, and this is now switching back to the general election, District 8 is going to be on the ballot, which is the incumbent Don Beyer, and Corinna Lipsman is going to be on the ballot for District 8. District 10 was Jennifer T. Wexton and Hung Kao. We're actually working with both candidates right now to put together a candidate forum, so please stay tuned. And we'll be sending out information about that. That's going to be sometime in the first part of October, so stay tuned. And then District 11, Congressional District 11, which is Jerry Conley, and Jim Miles will be on the ballot. And here's some really important dates. I know the print is extremely small, so don't worry about it. Don't try and rush and jot it down. We will be sending out a lot of notices between now and election day that is going to talk about these things. So, but remember, one of the main things that we need to remember is make sure you register to vote. Registration deadline is October 17th. So this includes if you are new to Virginia, if you moved, if you changed your name, any of those things. Make sure you update your information before October 17th. And make sure your friends and family members and who you work with, talk to them and say, have you checked to make sure that your registration is up to date and you can vote. You'll be able to vote absentee ballot as well. And so your last day to request absentee ballot to be able to vote by absentee is October 28th. And the deadline to return those ballots would be on November 8th by 7. Now, early voting, and I highly recommend this for everyone. If you're able to, early voting starts tomorrow, and it's going to go all the way through November 5th. So please visit your various locations that are going to be open starting tomorrow. And so from September 23rd, which is tomorrow, through November 5th, you're able to cast your ballot at the Fairfax County Government Center, as well as the Mount Vernon Government Center and the North County Government Center. And then there's a second shift that starts on October 27th through November 5th. And these are all the locations in which you can be able to vote early. And then there's some hours of operation. And then we're going to be able to do early voting. We're going to be able to vote on 2 Saturdays, which is October 29th and November 5th. And then we're going to have Souls to the Poll again this year, which is October 30th. So stay tuned. We're going to have some activities on October 30th as well. All right, so just to talk about very briefly about Andrea Miller's Democracy Center. These are independent centers that are located around the country, and they're typically located in areas where the Black vote is over 50% of no voting, of the already registered voters. There is one for Northern Virginia, which is comprised from all the way from Arlington down to Stafford. In Fairfax County in 2020, we had 52,000, a little bit over 52,000 Black registered voters, of which 28% did not vote. So that's another thing in which where we can increase Black voter participation. It's not just voter registration, but making sure that everybody who is registered to vote continue to vote. Infrequent voters also risk of getting their names taken off the registration rolls, which is very, very important. You have that conversation with somebody if they have not voted in 3 election cycles, for them to make sure that they're still eligible to vote. And if not, if they can get it done before registration deadline comes about, they will be able to vote in this year's November 8th election. And then, so these are some of the work that she's done since 2020 in terms of 14 million voters contacted. She's done a lot of work in Georgia and all over Texas and these different places, as well as have really high profile supporters, such as this Kerry Washington video, which I wish we had time to watch, but really encouraging everybody to get out to vote. And then there are other things that she has in terms of being able to do text in, phone cards, and all of these things, right? And sending postcards out to folks, getting that friendly reminder has been proven to help to encourage voter participation. So right now there is a campaign going on in Virginia. It started on November 5th, and we're going to be continually sending out postcards through October 1st. I will put in the link if this is something that you wanted to do. And just to show how these democracy centers, when it's able to establish itself within the community, how it helps to increase voter participation. So on the left, it shows last year there were democracy centers in Roanoke, Amelia, and those types of places, and they saw a significant increase in Black early voter turnout, whereas in these counties, it remains relatively low. And again, these are some of the campaigns that are going on. Text in, an outreach circle in which you can get some more information about all of the different things that are available for to help reach out to voters within Fairfax. And this is going to be very important. And they have a Power to the Polls campaign that's going on right now. NAACP will also be doing something along these lines in terms of making sure we have volunteers to register to become poll workers. We're anticipating that there is going to be a massive amount of efforts to suppress the Black and brown voter participation. And so it's very important that we have witnesses within the polling location to make sure that everybody who comes in is given their constitutional right to cast a ballot that will count. And I went over that in which it's a local resource. And then there is also a See Something, Say Something, which is a reporting tool that is a part of the website. I'll put the link in the chat box, in which if there are any issues on the that you witness at a particular polling location, there is a reporting mechanism. And so that concludes, and I'll just leave Andrea's contact information up for a few minutes, and then I'll also put all of those things in the chat box momentarily. And so with that, like I said, stay tuned. We're going to be sending out a lot more information. Our political action committee will be meeting this Saturday. I'll put the Zoom link to register in the chat box momentarily. And so now we're going to move over to our next portion of the meeting, in which we're going to hear from Andres Jimenez from Green 2.0 and Dr. Fergie Reed from 9490. But before we hear from them, I'd like to introduce Joel Pulliam, who is a part of our political action committee. Joel is he will be working and leading all of the efforts for our voter education and mobilization campaign. And so you'll be hearing a lot from him. So please make sure that you are receiving our newsletter. If you're not, please sign up for that. And so with that, I will turn it over to you, Joel. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Karen. My name is Joel. I'm not going to say too much. I have the honor of introducing our two guest speakers tonight, Mr. Andres Jimenez and Dr. Fergie Reed. We're so thankful to have them here to, discuss democracy and voting. And what we're going to do is, after each speaker, I'll have some questions for them. And if this is okay, Ms. Karen, is it okay if they put questions in the chat if they have any, or do you want to?
That's perfect.
Okay, so after each speaker, you guys can put questions in the chat if you have any. So first up is Mr. Andres Jimenez. Quick little bio, a longtime environmental advocate. Mr. Jimenez was tapped by Green 2.0's board of directors in June of 2020 to serve as its first full-time executive director. Andreas is a strategic thinker, a relationship builder, and carries a deep, empathetic connection to the communities he advocates. In 2020, Mr. Jimenez was appointed to serve as an at-large Fairfax County Planning Commissioner. So now the floor is yours, Mr. Jimenez, so you can take it away.
Well, thank you, Joel. And Karen, thank you so much for having me. Thank you all for having me. I'm excited to hear from Dr. Reed and the rest of the amazing speakers tonight. But tonight, when I talk about why voting matters, I'm going to come at it from an environmental standpoint, because Green 2.0 is an environmental organization, the only one of its kind that does what we do nationally. And that is, we are working to diversify the environmental sector, because we believe that without doing so, we can't move forward and accelerate change. And so I've got a quick PowerPoint that I am going to share with you all right now. So I'm going to share my screen. So give me one moment here and to get this pulled up. And here we go. All right. So Green 2.0. Let me talk a little bit about what we do and how what we do impacts local, state, and national politics, and how we're looking at and will be playing in the upcoming midterm election, and how the work we do, we're giving to both the administration, to Congress, and to nonprofits to take back to their districts to talk about the really important and timely issue of diversity, specifically in the environmental movement. So our mission, Green 2.0, is to ensure that the environmental movement is committed to diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, and recognize that leadership of people of color are there at every level of the movement. I've always said, I heard earlier today from someone speaking, they said, we want to have a seat at the table. And I've always said, that's not enough. We can't stop at just having a seat at the table. We need to have a voice at the table. It's not enough to have a seat at the table. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to amplify, we're trying to give a megaphone to those who has historically not had a seat or a voice at the table. And so we work with groups that again have historically not had that, whose communities are impacted by climate change, whose communities historically haven't had a voice, haven't had an opportunity to speak in front of Congress, in front of members of Congress, and we are here to give those communities and those leaders a voice. Our organization, as you can tell, is as diverse as what we preach. Our board is led by another diverse group, especially I'm going to highlight three members here on our board who work very closely on voting issues. You have Reverend Yearwood, who currently is doing some amazing Get Out the Vote initiatives across the country. Mark Magana, the head of Green Latinos, who is also pushing and engaging both youth and activists all across the country to get them to vote. And Dana Johnson, a member at We Act based out of New York, who is also working with communities, specifically communities who have historically, again, not had a voice, to get them out to vote and get them to understand that with their vote comes power. So once a year, Green 2.0 puts together a transparency report card. The transparency report card is a report card where we take 80 organizations and we ask these organizations, we ask them and say, how are you doing on transparency? Are you improving? And if so, where? You'd be surprised at how many groups won't even be transparent in the year 2022, which is not great. What we're asking is, we're saying, how are you transparent? How are you bringing people of color into your boards, into your leadership positions? Because it's those positions that shape the mission and change organizations, which then turn around and have specific impacts to communities. So what we need, and what we currently haven't had, is enough representation, diverse representation in these leadership positions. And so what we try to do is we try to work with, again, with the Hill, with the administration, with these organizations, and try to fill positions and make sure that they become as diverse as they need and should be during this time. I talked a little bit about what Green 2.0 is doing ahead of the midterm election around polling. So we are actually conducting the first ever comprehensive national poll around environmental issues, specifically talking about the need to bring in diverse voices. We are bringing a collection of the AAPI community, the Hispanic Latino community, the African American community, and the indigenous community, putting them all in a poll. And what we're going to do with this polling, again, is we're going to take this back to Congress and we're going to give it to the administration. And members of Congress are going to come back to their districts and say, we have this polling, first time ever polling, that says communities of color, the most impacted by climate change issues, need to be heard. We have to be working with these communities. They are being impacted, and we need to make sure that when we go and ask for their vote, that we're asking what is happening in their community, how issues around climate are impacting their communities, because they have long-term impacts that impact folks at every single age. You can be young, you can be, in your, midlife, and, toward, an elderly person, but climate and climate issues impact everyone. And those are potential voters. So those who are running for office need to be aware and need to be talking with, listening to, and taking the pulse of communities. Green 2.0 helps push out these issues through events. We have monthly events where we bring these voices, give them a megaphone and say, tell us about your issues, tell us what's going on with your communities, tell us how we can help. We work with elected officials and congressional staff. We've worked with, local elected officials. We work very closely with Congress. We have been in the room during important conversations. We work with the White House, with the administration, and we really push this message of diversity and the need to be hearing from communities that historically have not been heard from. Partners, we can't do this alone, and that is very important. You'll see some of the partners on here are both local, national. Obviously, we are very proud that the NAACP was one of our very first partners 2.5 years ago. And some of the other organizations that really have an impact on the ground, such as the Partnership for Southern Equity, which we are very close with, and the Hip Hop Caucus, which we work, again, very closely with Reverend Yearwood, who is on our board. Folks ask, what can you do? And I've always said, if you don't know, you don't know. And that means we put out reports constantly. We're constantly doing events. Sign up, follow us. Learn about our reports, learn about our initiatives, see if you can help push out what we're doing. The more folks that hear our message about the importance and the timeliness of needing to diversify, not only the environmental sector, but all sectors. The more that message gets through, the better off we'll all be, because it's absolutely critical and important that we are working to diversify the movement, but also diversify our elected officials. And so with that, I will stop sharing my screen. I will try to stop sharing my screen. How do I stop sharing my screen? 1 second. Okay, there you go. I now stopped sharing my screen. So that's a little bit about Green 2.0. That's how we are working with different areas, different communities, different groups to really try to make sure that we are as diverse as possible and as diverse as we should be. So thank you. And thank you, Joel.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the work that you have done and are continuing to do. I have a few questions for you. First, I wanted to ask, how can, and you might have answered this before, you did practically, but how can individuals partner with Green 2.0 to advance racial equity in the environmental movement?
So we've been partnering with small organizations, local organizations, medium and large organizations, because I think it's really key that all types of organizations, when it comes to size, realize and understand that they can be part of the conversation. So you don't have to be a big national group to work on these issues. You can be a small local group, because elections happen, as you know, Joel, at all different facets. There are local elections, state elections and federal elections. Those are all important, and it all comes back to communities. So the way you can engage is work with us or help us push our messaging out, because it is a timely message. And one of the things that I've always said is, even when it's not in the news, even when you're not watching it every single night, it's still an issue that's happening. We absolutely have to diversify. And because we're not seeing it every single night, doesn't mean it's not happening. And by not happening, I mean, it doesn't mean that all of a sudden this issue is fixed. We are still having problems. We are still seeing a lack of continued success in many areas. And so we need to have a steady drumbeat and continue to work on these issues, because they haven't gone away and they're not going away anytime soon. And we need more partners.
100% agree. Second question is, what role can environmental organizations play in advancing voting rights?
They can play a huge role. I think that one of the things everyone has seen is that over the years, the environmental issues have become more of a priority, where, years and years ago, it was something that really wasn't on voters' minds when they went to the polls. Right now, because of youth, because of the internet, and because of social media and everything that's changed with this 24-hour media cycle, that issues around climate are real, they're happening, people are taking notice, and they think about it as they head to the polls. They're not just saying, oh, we don't care, this doesn't impact us, right? This is impacting everyone. Just here in this area, I mean, how warm has it been in September, right? Like, this isn't by accident, this is happening. These are things that we feel. These are impacts that are felt not by the rich, not by the poor, but by everyone in between. And so when folks head to the polls, they are thinking about, how does the person I'm about to elect, what is their stance on climate? What do they believe? What do they think? And I think that this specific environmental sector has an ability to work with other groups and advocates on the ground to really push certain candidates and make sure the candidates are asking the right questions, especially about the impacts of climate issues to communities, especially communities of color.
Thank you. I have one last question. We are in an environmental crisis with sea levels rising at an exponential rate. This is also occurring amidst certain state lawmakers throughout the country passing sweeping voter suppression laws that are actively suppressing the vote for communities of color. Not to mention detrimental effects from the Dobbs decision, what it's had on women's rights throughout the country. In light of all of this, what's at stake with this upcoming midterm election?
What's at stake is the direction of the country. And it's a very important election. We're looking at the fact that nationally the House might flip, the Senate might flip, and these elections absolutely have consequences, and they have consequences both locally, statewide, federally, and we need to make sure that not only are we out going to the polls, but that we're telling our friends to go, as Karen said, tell your friends to go to the poll, bring a friend. It is extremely important that we are taking this seriously, that we understand that voting has consequences one way or another. And a lot of those consequences are really going to hang in the balance in the November midterm. And we need to make sure that we are electing those who are thinking about our communities, that have our communities on their mind, that have women's rights on their mind, that have the climate and the environment on their minds. It is a very important election that we need to have all hands on deck to be out, to be voting, and to be making sure that we're not letting any vote unturned. And so it is critically important.
Totally agree. All hands on deck. I believe we have someone who has their hand raised. I guess you wanted to ask a question. If you could unmute yourself. All right, there you go.
Yeah. Thanks very much. I just wanted to ask Mr. Jimenez, when you survey minority communities about climate change, do you ask them about the impact of gas prices, higher gas prices, and food prices?
We do. Our polling work, which is we're in the, I would say, past the middle part, we have a long list of issues that we're discussing, as well as some different legislation, as well as legislative priorities that are coming up that we are asking the folks that we're polling. So we are making sure that it is not only diverse in the folks that we're asking, but also diverse in the questions that we're asking and how we're asking them, to make sure that this polling is as ample as possible.
Thank you.
Did anybody else have any other questions before we move to our next speaker? Just wanted to ask. Okay. Again, thank you so much, Mr. Jimenez, for joining us and for all the work that you've done and what you continue to do. Next up, I believe we have Dr. Fergie Reed. Quick little bio. Dr. William Ferguson Fergie Reed is a Virginia physician, politician, and civil rights activist. In 1968, Dr. Reed became the first African American elected to the Virginia Assembly since the days of Reconstruction. He has won re-election twice to the Virginia House of Delegates, representing Richmond and a part of surrounding Henrico County. To encourage broader voter participation, he began the voter participation campaign in 2015. It is an honor to introduce Dr. Reed. So, sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you so very much, and thank you for inviting me to this meeting. I thought I might say something first about the effect the NAACP has had on my life to show you how important the NAACP still is. I was born in 1925, and in the 30s, I realized that there was such a thing as NAACP. My father was very active. He was on the board, national board. My mother was very active in working as a volunteer in the NAACP's office. Licking stamps, stuffing envelopes, and licking envelopes to get mailings out. I first was aware of the NAACP when the Richmond branch decided that because the grocery store, Atlantic and Pacific grocery store, better known as the A&P, did not have any Black employees, even though it was located in a Black neighborhood. So they decided to picket the NAACP, the A&P grocery stores to try to force them to hire Blacks. However, they were unsuccessful. The other thing I remember about that time, in 1939, the NAACP held its national convention in Richmond. At that time, they invited Brian Anderson to receive the Spingarn Medal of Achievement, and they invited Eleanor Roosevelt to present the medal to her. Of course, that was a big thing in Richmond, and I remember it, and I don't think I'll ever be able to forget that. And I left Richmond in 1944 to go to med school, do a residency in St. Louis, and spend 2 years with the Navy, with the Marine Corps in Korea. I spent the years from 1954 to 1955 with Marines in Korea. Half of it was spent in the MASH unit, and half of it was spent in a battalion. In May, the results of the Supreme Court decision on integrating the schools, the Supreme Court issued the edict that we should integrate the schools. And over in Korea, I was the only Black officer in the unit, and I think I was the only one that was elated and happy. Some of my fellow physicians were from the South, and one of them told me, Fergie, this is going to never happen. We will resist it to the end. I was naive, and I thought that whatever the Supreme Court said, we had to follow. You know, we were to be law-abiding citizens. But I later found out that that was not true. After I was discharged in September of '55, I got back in Richmond. There was a referendum held to decide whether Virginia would integrate or would fight the edict of the Supreme Court. Because of the poor turnout among Blacks, specifically throughout Virginia, the message came through that Virginia would rather close all of the public schools than to integrate. The one good thing that came out of the referendum was that it was the first time that blacks and whites in Virginia supported a political movement. We were able to locate and identify progressive whites that came out to support Save Our Schools, which otherwise had not happened. Because of the poor turnout among blacks, it was decided that we would form a different organization. The NAACP was under attack from the Virginia legislature. They were trying to put them out of business by demanding the list of members of the NAACP, which the NAACP refused to do. So they decided to get out of voter registration because that was putting gasoline on the fire to make the conservatives hate the NAACP more. So they disbanded their voter registration committee. However, there were several people on the committee who wanted to form some type of organization that could continue voter registration. Two of the members of the voter registration committee were very active, and one was William Thornton, and the other was Johnny Brooks. So they decided that they would call a meeting of all of the people that were on the board of the NAACP and to set up a new organization. So I renewed my friendship with them. They were both older than me. So they invited me to the meeting. And they said, it's going to be a large meeting and we're going to have a lot of people there. If we get some direction as to how we can continue the voter registration. So I attended the meeting, and lo and behold, I was the only person who attended the meeting. So the three of us, I got involved because I was the only one there. So we decided that we would try to have a larger meeting eventually to come up with an organization that would dedicate itself specifically to voter registration, voter education, and get out the vote efforts. We found that there are a lot of organizations, but they tried to do too many things, and none of them were concentrating on voter registration. So we specifically determined that any organization that we would come up with would not get involved in other civil rights activities, because there were other organizations doing that and they were not doing a good job because they were spread themselves too thin, trying to save the world when the big problem was voter registration among blacks. So with the follow-up with other meetings, we decided to form an organization called the Crusade for Voters. Johnny, Bill, and I met every day around lunch to come up with a plan as to how we would do the voter registration drives. While I was in Korea, and after being approached by my fellow Southerners saying that they would resist, I began thinking of what can we do that's not being done, and why we are not very effective in what we're trying to do. So I thought about the precincts. The precincts are the foundation of all political organizations. And this is where the energy is. I'm not going to elaborate on how the political structure, but I perceive politics as a pyramid, and the precincts are the base of the pyramid because that's where the voters are, and that's where the energy comes from in any organization. For instance, in the pyramid, the reason they are standing because they have a firm foundation with the big stones at the base of the pyramid. And as you go up the pyramid, the stones become smaller and smaller. But the energy comes from the base, and that holds the pyramid up. And to resist gravity, the energy comes from the base. It's the same way with any organization. The people and the members are the foundation of any movement. If you don't have a firm foundation with the people, you cannot achieve anything. You see, the reason we'll never have a third party is because the third party starts at the top. The first thing they do, they get somebody to run for president, and they don't have any members at the base of the foundation to get the energy to give them some power. So the power comes from the base. It's an old saying that democracy is of the people, by the people, and for the people. So if you don't have the people, you don't get any of the energy. And the operative word is by the people. We as the members of organizations don't realize the power that we have, the power of the vote. The vote is more powerful, the ballot is more powerful than bullets. So we have to instill in all of our members that they are very powerful. And in order to exert their powerful, not only do they have to vote and encourage other people to vote, but they also have the obligation of running for public office. And we have been a little afraid to run for public office, but it's our responsibility in the organizations that we are involved in to not only get out the vote, but in order we have to run for public office. Now, next year is a year that we have many elections throughout the state of Virginia. There's a schedule of elections that you can get from the Department of Elections if you go to their website that tells all of the elections in 2023. To give you an idea of a quick rundown, the Senate is up for election, 40 members. House of Delegates are up for election, 100 members. Soil and water directors. I don't know what they do, but apparently they need somebody to vote for those directors the 4-year term, and you will have to find out within your own district what they do and how to qualify for that. And the counties, we have what we call the constitutional offices. The constitutional offices are as follows: clerk of court, Commonwealth attorney, sheriff, commissioner of revenue, and treasurer. They are a special group of people to be elected. These constitutional officers were the ones that enabled the Byrd machine to be so effective over a long period of time. It's strictly patronage. Once you are elected, you are employed by the state of Virginia, and you are entitled to all of the retirement benefits, health benefits, and so forth that are given to the employees of the state of Virginia. And they have a lot of patronage. For instance, the sheriff can have all of his relatives on the payroll, and this is what happens. So they have patronage in appointing people to work with them. They're paid by the state. They get into the retirement system, and under the Byrd machine, once you were elected to that, you were elected really for life. But fortunately now, they are up for election. So it's very important that we have people running for these offices. But now, there are 3 city councils for elections, 3 cities election for election, town councils, town mayors, so school boards are also up for election. So each county probably has at least 5 districts or 6 districts or more. So you have the people who are running for town councils. So the number throughout Virginia will be over 1,000 people running for office next year. So we have a problem. It's our duty to recommend people to run or to run ourselves for some of these positions. Now, the school boards are very effective because they're the ones that are going to determine the curriculum and determine the books that are going to be used in these various school systems. And you're already aware of some of the facts that several of the school boards are now trying to get rid of some of the textbooks that they think encourage people to vote or encourage integration. So it's very important that we have people running for all of these school board positions throughout Virginia. So these are the first things we have to do, not only vote, but we have to run for public office. These are some of the things I had in mind to discuss with you. I'd be glad to answer any questions. If you have some questions, I did not explain in detail some of the things that I mentioned. So with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Hey, sir. I had a question for you. Do you have anything to say to people who say that their vote might not really matter, or that their voice is neglected when they vote?
Yes, I tell them voting is our salvation in order to save democracy. I explained to them what happened in the insurrection when we almost had our government overthrown, and that is likely to happen again. And if you want to be under a dictatorship, your not voting will speed the time that we will be under the rule of a dictator or an authoritarian form of government. We have to protect democracy or our right to vote by voting. If we don't vote in this election, and if we don't elect good people to our legislature, they can take control of the government by making it more difficult for us to exercise our duty as citizens. So if we want to save democracy, we have to vote. And it's within this election, 2022, 23, and 24, if we don't get a majority, then we're in for an authoritarian form of government.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Wow, that was a great answer. Does anybody else, does anyone else have any questions? You can raise your hand or you can leave it in the chat. I believe we have Dr. Reed's email, I believe, in the chat. So if you guys want to speak to him. Okay, we have Dr. Thompson, I believe, has a question.
Hey there. Yes. So, Dr. Reed, thank you so much for your words and for all the service that you provided to us over the years. I just have a question in regards to where you think we are right now in terms of socially. I know that NAACP is nonpartisan, but just kind of the lay of the land with the current governor, social equity issues, education. Just kind of want to get a little bit more thoughts or comments from you about where we are today and where we're going in the future.
Well, I think we're in a precarious position today. That's why it's very important for us to register every voter and get them out to vote. And NAACP and other organizations are doing it. And this is our last chance, 2022, 23, 24. We have to, in on the public and keep telling them that they are very important, that they have to get involved, and it's their duty to get involved. And we have to also tell them that fortunately politics is addicting. Once you get involved, you really realize what you can accomplish. A few people working together can accomplish a lot. So we have to let them know that they are important, that in order for us to succeed, they have to participate. And by participating, it makes all of us more powerful. Once that we get that into their thinking, they usually follow through and become leaders. When we started the Crusade for Voters, in Virginia, there were about 68 precincts. And I can't keep telling you how important it is to organize the precincts in each of your communities. There are about 28 precincts out of 68 that had predominant Negroes or Blacks, that we felt that if we got a majority or got a voter registration job in those precincts, we could be able to make big steps in the government of Richmond. So what we did, we identified those precincts, and Bill and Johnny and I said that let each one of us take on the responsibility of organizing these precincts. So we said that we'd start off in the precincts that we live in, because most of the people that we lived in went to college, were employed, could afford the poll tax at that time, and it wouldn't take them long to realize or get them to cooperate once they found that there was some organization within that precinct to work with. So we took, each one of us took the precinct that we lived in, and we took a precinct in the housing projects. There were housing projects throughout the city, and the housing projects that were the largest and where the voter turnout was less. So we took one of the difficult ones and one of the ones that we thought we wouldn't have any problem. So to make a long story short, we would find out somebody in the precincts that we knew, and we'd ask them to have 4 or 5 people in their house so that we could meet with them and set up, explain to them what we were trying to do. Once we met with those 4 or 5 people, we told them, well, we need a bigger meeting. Why don't you go to one of your churches and set up a date, and we'll give you the leaflets to pass around and so forth to get the vote out. We'll get some refreshments for the people that attend. So that we put the responsibility on them, and they would set up, go to the church, make the arrangements, and we would get the leaflets and some refreshments. And then we would get 20 or 30 people to attend. And once we got to that group, we talked to them, told them what we planned to do, and we suggested that we have a larger meeting. And at that time, we would show them how to set up an organization. We wanted them to set up a civic organization in that precinct. So not only would they have voter registration, but we also have a civic organization within that precinct. So whenever they approach city council or whatever they needed, all of the crusade throughout the state of city would go to that city council meeting and let them present whatever their issues were. We also gave them a quick course on civic organization, Robert's Rules of Organization, and we had them install the offices once they got elected. So once they got elected, they were pretty much on their own, and we wanted to make them self-sufficient but we would back up with whatever they needed. We would be their backup. The crusade had monthly meetings, and we invited them to the meetings, and we tried to get them to set up monthly meetings of their precinct organizations so that they would take charge, be responsible, and initiate things, and we would be a backup to them. But we wanted to press it upon them for voter registration, getting out the vote, having poll workers on election day, and having people to transport people to the polls, that they would set that up and be responsible for that. We would serve backup in any of the areas that they needed. They would pass out our sample ballots that we passed out throughout the city. So we would support them, but they were had the authority or the responsibility of being independent. Once that started, because Virginia has elections every year, once they set it up, they would do the same thing for each election. They would not have to reinvent the wheel. They would take our slate of voters and they would follow through. We drew up the slate, but the citywide crusade had a committee that interviewed all of the candidates, and they would come up with the slate of officers for the whole city because there was a city council election at large at that particular time. Did that answer your question?
Sorry.
Any other?
Yes.
I believe we had a question in the chat. Lenora, hopefully I'm not mispronouncing your name, so I'm sorry. Simmons said, thank you, Dr. Reed, for sharing your history in Virginia. It is so important to know where we have been so that history doesn't repeat itself. Voter suppression continues today with new methods to stop others from voting. What are your suggestions to fight against this?
Well, the key is the Virginia State Legislature. We have to get a majority in the Senate, and we have to get a majority in the House. Once we do that, then we can shape things. If we don't have a majority and the opposition has a majority, then they're in control and they're going to shape things. They're going to make it more difficult for us to vote and make it more difficult for us to have liberal curricula in the schools. So voting and the schools and abortion rights, we can control that if we have a large turnout for not only for the congressional delegation, because congressional delegation can control it nationally, but if we want to control it statewide, next year we got to make sure that we have all of the people running for all of the offices that I mentioned. If we can get a majority, then we can control our destinies. If we don't have a majority, we cannot control our destinies.
I 100% agree. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We can't control our destinies without control. I wanted to ask, does anyone else have any other questions for Dr. Reed? In the chat, or anybody want to raise their hand? Okay. Well, with that, Dr. Reed, it is personally an honor, but it's an honor for all of us to hear from you, for your wisdom and for your service throughout all these years. So thank you so very much. So
right, I think they're going to give you information as to how to contact me.
yes,
Send me an email, and I will put your telephone number in there. And I'm of the telephone generation, so I still use the telephone. So you will get a call from me, and we can discuss whatever topic you want to discuss. Again, thank you for inviting me, and looking forward to hearing from you.
yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you so much. I don't know who I'm supposed to pass this off to. I don't know if it's Miss Karen or.
Yeah, I can grab it. Thank
Okay,
you.
all right.
And
Yes.
I know that Andres is still on the phone. I don't know if you wanted to take a few minutes to give us any closing or parting words. And this goes for Dr. Reed. If you have any just some closing words you'd like to give us some more of your wonderful wisdom.
Well, Karen, I just want to say thank you again. And, the importance of voting is felt even way after the elections, as we all know. And I think that, as I mentioned during my time, it's definitely an all hands on deck situation coming up in the midterm elections. And, whether it's doing our part nationally or locally, every vote counts, every election matters. And I think that, we really need to be working with other advocates. We need to be working with other groups. We need to be learning from one another. Today it's been a wonderful experience learning from Dr. Reed, so from his rich history and his deep understanding of so much. So I think that it behooves all of us to be able to just continue to learn, to educate ourselves, but also to make sure that we are marching out there and going out and voting, because it not only impacts ourselves, our families, our communities, but those coming behind us as well. So again, thank you for having me on.
And thank you for being on, and we look forward to continuing to work with you. The environment, that topic is so important, and it's becoming more and more urgent and critical, particularly for the Black and Brown and Indigenous communities. And so it's very important for us to be able to get our voice as part of it. The environment, we live off the land, clean air, clean land, clean water. So we look forward to continue to work with you both here in Virginia and nationally as we combat all of these climate changes. And
Absolutely.
the that are happening. So thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
And then Dr. Reed, I don't know if you have any closing on parting words that you'd like to share with us. I've placed your email in the chat box for anybody that wants to continue the conversation with Dr. Fergie Reed.
One thing I'd like to add about the question, why should I vote? My one vote won't count. In the last election, one of the elections in Virginia, the vote was tied, and they had to draw straws to find out who won. So your one vote would have made a difference. Often votes so close, 10 votes maybe make a difference. That's one vote per precinct. If we get one vote extra in each precinct, we would win. So your vote is important, and it does count.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Reed. And I look forward to continuing having conversations both with you and with Fergie about how we can increase voter participation here in Fairfax County, as well as throughout the Commonwealth. And I really appreciate you joining us. I know this is something that you and I have been talking about for a couple of years, so I'm very excited that we are able to do it. And we look forward to continued conversations with you and being able to celebrate and increase in voter participation here in Fairfax County with this election and next year.
Yeah, I enjoyed being with you.
Thank you. And then to Joel, I want to say thank you so much for being such an amazing and wonderful moderator and facilitator tonight. And so it pivoted on a dime to accommodate some of the last minute changes we had, but I truly appreciate your work here tonight. And so with that, I will now switch gears over and hand the mic over to our first Vice President and Chair of our Freedom Fund Committee, Michelle Leet, who's going to be talking about the upcoming branch elections.
Good evening, everyone. I will make this brief. You should have been seeing information about the branch elections in the news for you. If you haven't, I'm just going to briefly go over it, and then I will also post it in the chat. Of course, it is an election year all over, but especially for the branch. So every even year we have an election and our officers serve for 2 years. The positions of president, first, second, third, vice president, secretary, as well as assistant secretary, treasurer, assistant treasurer, and member at large, are all elected by ballot this year. The timeline for the election is September. A nominating committee is convened, is elected by the branch. The first meeting of that committee has to be within 10 days after the election. At the October general membership meeting, the nominating committee will submit their report in writing of all the nominees. At this same meeting, an election supervisory committee is convened or elected. That consists of 5 members who will perform the duties of supervising the election machinery, and creating a complete ballot. Now, some of these responsibilities are now being taken over by national. So the election supervisory committee duties are really to make sure that the ballot is complete and has all the nominees on it. National will run the election actually via online. That election will take place at our November general membership meeting, which is on November 17th. That is a virtual meeting. And like I said, the election will be virtual as well. The ballot will be emailed in the morning on November 17th about 9 o'clock, and it will close at about 7 p.m. right for the start of our general membership meeting on the 17th. You must be a member in good standing to be eligible to vote. And for the purpose of branch elections, good standing means you need to be a member at least 30 days prior to the election. If you have any questions about your membership status, you want to contact our secretary. And I'll put this information as well as the secretary's email address in the chat box. I'll do that right now. So I'm going to turn it back over to President Camblin, who will call for nominations from the floor for the nominating committee. And then we will take our vote, and I'll pass the mic back to her to end the meeting.
So,
President Camblin.
yeah, oh, sorry. So I'm calling for nominations. Are there any nominations from the floor or anyone to be a part of the nomination committee that Vice President Leach has just explained?
And if you could put your names in the chat, that would be great. And so we can make sure that it is recorded. Yes, Ms. Simmons, you can be on the nominating committee and be on the ballot. President Camblin, I believe you have 4. We would need at least 1 more.
I believe
I was trying to put it in the chat, but I mean, I guess can I self-nominate myself or?
You can, but if you could put your name in the chat so we can have,
Okay,
again,
well,
have it.
okay,
Yeah,
sorry about that.
that's okay.
want to keep it open just for a little bit longer?
President Camlin, this is Reverend Linda Alacuto. I'm somehow not able to put it in the chat, but I'd like to self-nominate for the nominating committee.
Okay, can I type that in, Michelle? Is that okay?
Yep, that is okay. So, Reverend Linda, I think we already, you can only have 2 executive committee members on the nominating committee. And I
Okay.
believe we already have 2.
I can step out, Michelle, if Linda wants to.
No, that's fine. You can stay
Duke it
in.
out. Duke it out.
So it also needs to be an odd number. So I believe we still do need 1 more though. I believe we have 6, if I'm counting correctly.
This is Lenore Simmons. The chat is disabled. However, I thought I heard you say that October 17th is the meeting of the nominating committee. Is that correct?
No, November 17th is the election. The meeting of the nominating committee will be called by the secretary. It has to happen within 10 days of today.
Okay, great. Thank you. I was going to remove my nomination if that was the case, but.
So President Campbell, we do need 1 more.
Can I volunteer somebody?
You can volunteer. Yeah.
All right, let's see who's here. I see Melissa's on the line.
I am.
Would you like to type something?
I guess I could type something.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is that?
Oh, that's weird.
Yes.
Actually, chat's disabled right now. Oh, there we go.
Oh. Okay, so thank you, Melissa. Okay, so it looks like we've got enough. So I will close the slate for the nomination committee and call for a vote of approval of the names. Were you keeping track of them, Michelle? Do I need to repeat them, or we can just go ahead and vote?
Sure. I can repeat them.
Thank you.
I have Harry Jackson, Lenore Simmons, myself, Michelle Leet, Mike Woltz, Brandon Cassidy, Joel Pulliam, and Melissa Teets.
Okay, so all in favor off the slate Michelle just read, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Anyone abstaining? Okay. Vote approved, passes. So I turn everything back over to you, Michelle, to conclude this, please.
Oh, sure. I think that does conclude it. I did put the dates for what's up next in the chat, but again, October general membership meeting, the slate will be announced, as well as we will elect the election supervisory committee, and then November 17th will be the online election. Again, you must be a member in good standing at least 30 days prior to November 17th in order to vote. And stay tuned for more information from the nominating committee about the slate. And then also, President Camlin, if I can take a point of personal privilege, branch privilege, actually, we do have our Freedom Fund luncheon coming up on October 1st. You should have seen that in the newsletters. If you have not purchased your ticket yet, please do so. It is going to be a treat. We have a great DJ, great music. We have some community awards that we'll be handing out. And we have a silent auction that's online that's going on right now as well. I believe we have about 30, 40 tickets left. So please, please, please purchase your tickets. I think Wednesday it closes because we do need to get the numbers over to the hotel. But please come out and join us on next Saturday at 11:30. President Camlin, that ends my report.
Thank you, Vice President Lee. Okay, and then we have one more report we've got to do, and then we can close out the meeting. So I think Paul, if he came back, if Paul Berry, who is a member of the governor's Hispanic Advisory Council, is here to talk about some of the events that are going on to celebrate the Hispanic Heritage Month. So thank you for joining us here today, Paul.
Thank you, President Camlin. Good evening, everybody. My name is Paul Berry. I am a member of the Virginia Latino Advisory Board. I was appointed to the board under Governor Northam. Just here briefly to end out the meeting, I hope with something a little fun. So we're in the middle of Hispanic Heritage Month 2022. It started on September 15th and it goes through the middle of next month. And let's see if I can, okay, there we go. Just wanted to share a few events that are happening in Fairfax County and nearby. A little bit of diversity in here just to kind of satisfy as many interests as possible. If you're interested in, if you're looking for a job, or you're interested in starting a business, or you have a business and you want to grow it, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce is going to have its Hispanic Heritage Month mixer on the 5th. It's a Wednesday at 5:30 in Tyson's Corner. A little more on the fun side, in the High Blow Valley Community Center, there's going to be an HHM celebration. There's going to be a similar celebration in Reston at the Teen Center that's oriented towards our high schoolers, middle schoolers, and families. The Sully Community Center is going to have a Hispanic Heritage Month celebration also on October 15th. And then if you want to go a little bit further out, I had to throw this one in because I love the name. It's the Loco Latina Festival, the Loudoun County. They're having their celebration on October 23rd. And finally, if you're like me and you have a young child or young children, there's going to be the Frozen and Encanto is playing from October 6th to the 10th nearby Disney on Ice. And if anybody needs, if anybody's interested in one or more of these, I'm going to put my email in there, and I can give you the specific details about when, where, etc. But of course, we couldn't celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month without the most important thing, food. So Restaurant Week is going to be taking place from the 10th to the 16th. My family comes from Mexico, so I grew up eating a lot of traditional Mexican food, and then a lot of Tex-Mex also, from, you know, when you blend the two families together. I don't really know a lot about South American food, and I absolutely love Restaurante Week because I get to discover cuisines from this beautiful, enormous continent that I don't really have a connection to. So I encourage you to go and find your local Latino or Hispanic restaurant and enjoy something good, support a local business, and have a good meal at the same time. So that's all I wanted to share. Thank you, President Camlin, for letting me join for a couple minutes, and I'll put my email in the chat if anybody wants details about food or events. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us here today, Paul, and we appreciate the information you provided. So if everybody has a chance, please try and catch as many of those wonderful events and partake in the wonderful culinary experiences at these events. So thanks for being here. I think we've got about 2 or 3 minutes left. I'll see if Paul, Lenore would like for you to put the Restaurant Week website in the chat as well. And so if I will kind of open the floor up, if anybody has any questions or have any comments that they'd like to share with us before we leave, I'll just leave that open for a couple minutes. All right.
I guess we've lost Dr. Reed, but I noticed he's 97 years old. And I really wanted to ask him what his secret was. And I was prepared for him to say that the answer was political activism.
Yeah, I'm quite sure that, you know, he started his 90 for 90 program. You know, it was just incredible at 90, you know, it's just, he has been just doing this wonderful job in terms of inspiring people to get involved and to run for office or mobilize their community. It's just an inspiration to hear from him. But yeah, I would have loved to have heard his answer too. All right, well, I don't see any questions or any hand raised, so I want to say thank you so much for joining us in this important conversation. Please, please, please join us for our Freedom Fun event, as Michelle said, on October 1st. If you have any questions about political action, I put my contact information, as well as we can give you information about voter registration drives that are being led by Reverend Linda Alacudo. And so not to put Reverend Linda Alacudo on the spot, but would you like to close us out, Reverend Linda?
Thank you for asking me to close us out. And I am respectful of all of the different faith traditions that we have with us tonight. And so in response to that, this is what I'd like to offer. We all know that the word amen or amen means so be it. So I'm going to pray an interfaith prayer. And if you agree, at the end of it, I'm just asking you to say, so be it. Okay? Can we do that? Thank you. In the spirit of love and compassion, let us pray. Spirit of life, be in our hearts and minds as we come together to pray about voting. May each of us from our own traditions come together today to lift our spirits in unity. Knowing that we are interconnected, let us acknowledge and embrace our oneness. We pray that we may be loving and able stewards of our right to vote. We pray that when we vote, we will seek out our common ground, each of us voting toward the good of all. We call upon your strength, Spirit of light, so that we may be the best that we're called to be, even when we vote. Let us be the good we want to see in others, and let us work and vote to be the change that we seek as we renew these goals in our hearts. If you can agree with that, let us say amen, or so be it.
Amen.
Amen.
So be it, you know.
Amen. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Reverend Linda. Everyone have a good night, and we'll see you October 1st.
Hey, Karen,
Yes. Hey, Arthur.
I'm ready to talk environmental justice with you at some point now. I finally listened to the podcast that Sujatha wanted me to listen to. So
Yeah,
there's no rush, you know, I'm swamped right now, so.
Yeah. Maybe
Uh,
after the election.
After the election, maybe 2023, right?
Yeah, or even that, because we're going to roll
Because
right into the
then-
holidays.
Yeah, and hi, Michelle, nice to see you.
Hi, Arthur, how are you?
Fantabulous.
Good. I guess I could
Okay,
stop
thanks.
recording now.
Thanks for, notice I'm saying it's an interesting meeting, right?